Welcome to the Influence Factory podcast. This program is dedicated to support professionals who have a desire to develop their digital business influence so they can navigate through a fast-paced, constantly growing digital world. We invite newcomers as well as our family of business influencers to a place to play, share ideas, questions, tips, and guidance with other thought leaders around the globe. Sit back and enjoy our program with our host Dean DeLisle as he interviews guests. News and commentary is provided by Kate Hassett and Jackson DeLisle. Power Move lessons are provided by the Influencer Marketing Department at Social Jack. And production, editing, and distribution is provided by the Social Jack production team.
So let's go ahead and introduce our guest this week. Melissa Wilson is my publisher, guest influencer this week, and president of Networlding, a turnkey book creation firm. She and her team offer Make a Difference leaders to turnkey process to successfully write, publish, and launch their nonfiction books. Although I think I'd like to do a fiction book. I have to talk about that. But I want to welcome five-time bestselling author Melissa Wilson. Hey, Melissa, how you doing?
Hi.
Welcome from Palm Springs, right?
Yeah, I was going to say I have a Networld here too. It's just orange. I wanted to go with all of your recommendations for visuals.
I know. All of a sudden, I'm like, I love this room that you're in. And I want to thank you because I know there's construction following you all over the U.S. as you travel.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And is Lexy joining you today, or is she in another room?
Lexy went off with my husband to the park, but I brought a picture of her just so that everybody knows. She's usually in the building somewhere. So thanks for asking about her.
She's a golden doodle, right?
Yeah, she's a toy golden doodle, which we've seen just one other so far. Most people have minis or the large ones, but she looks like Princess Leia. So I actually had a picture, which I think is so cute, with her little ears like Princess Leia. Remember her with those braids? So I said, here's Princess Lulu, because she's Lexy Lulu, and then here's Princess Leia. So
that's awesome. Well, you're helping me with my book launch, and you've helped me get through the writing of my book. And there's many chapters to writing chapters in a book, no pun intended.
Yes.
And so before we get into sort of helping others that might have a book on their mind, and I'm curious from the audience if you could chime in or chat and think about and let us know, have you written a book or are you looking to write a book soon? That would be awesome, so we can know where you're at in your journey, because everyone has a book in them. However, you and I met, I don't know if I want to say decades ago, but a while ago, in the networlding world. And you came into a Vistage group and spoke to us. And I believe I read your book. I believe I read your book at that time. So tell us a little bit how you got started and a little bit about what networlding is, because I think it's totally relevant for our audience and how they work.
Sure. Well, I had been writing books. And by the way, one of the bestsellers, the Wall Street Journal bestseller, is a fiction book. It's a parable. And that one's called Networking is Dead. And it's really about making connections that matter. And I know that's what you're all about. So I'll preface the whole journey to connect with you now with the, if you will, the hashtag no, KNOW is different than capital KNOW, knowing someone. And so I would say, and I do like to use a scale from 1 to 10, because everybody knows what a 10 is, if you will. I would say we were connected at maybe a 2 level when we began.
Right.
But now we're connected, I think, at a 9 to 10 level. And there's the book and the way the journey that you took and I take with my authors is very similar to the journey I took. I started writing books my first book came out in 1990, and that was the Chicago Entrepreneur Source Book. And Crain's made that one of their top 10 books for the year. And because of that, I was networked in immediately to the Chamber of Commerce, the state of Illinois. We used to have a women's business advocate. I worked with the SBA. It was the wonderful door opener into relationships, authentic, connective, growing relationships with so many places, and then banks. So I got involved with banks because banks are the one place they don't have billable hours. I have a law degree, so I was at a big law firm for a while and then segued off into entrepreneurship. But that wonderful journey was through banks, and I was the longest trainer at teaching networking, which was my second book that came out in 1993. And I got housed in with Furs, if anybody remembers them. They got bought up by RS, I think H&R Block, and then RSM McGladrey.
Right.
But they had a training arm, and I got to work with them helping 300 accounting firms learn networking. So that's where I had guinea pigs practicing, and I started evolving a methodology that led me to getting on the board at the University of Chicago, the Women's Graduate Advisory Board, connecting with my co-author on Networlding, which was then moving up to my seventh book. I did other books on questioning, how to create great questions, and all kinds of other leadership books. But when I met Jocelyn, who was, at that time, she opened up Latin America for Motorola. Then she became the first CMO of Motorola. And because of the book, I ended up with a $500,000 contract at Motorola, teaching them how to become marketers, which that was the year 2000, when everything started transitioning, if you remember, into the social world. So in Chicago, I was there being a mentor to Chad Coe, who took years saying, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it. And eventually he went, oh my God, I get it. And the rest is history. I also was there with Lillian Biorshev, helping her get started, helping people do networking events, doing dozens and dozens and dozens of networking events for all the Loyola, DePaul, University of Chicago. I was there every year. I was on the board for 7 years. And what I learned is there are so many shy people in the world, and I'm one of them. So
that's crazy. And I always thought of you as this networking person because you were running all these groups.
Right. And I am definitely one of those people who suffers from loneliness. I'm a connection-holic. But I'm afraid, I hate social networking events because you go in there, and especially for introverts, it's overwhelming, and you don't know where to start. You don't know how to open up a conversation. You don't want to you don't want people to perceive you as hawking your wares. So I actually created events that were structured and interactive. So everybody got to know each other. And one time we brought 22 chambers together, and I would have people at events walking up to me and saying, I'm so afraid I can't look anyone in the eyes. And what I'd do is I'd start the event by bringing that person up on stage, and I'd say, okay, and this guy's name was Manny, and he was scared to death. And I said, Manny feels like no one cares about him because people don't look him in the eyes when they shake his hand. Can you please go up to him and just do that? Well, at the end, this was on the car. What is it? I'm trying to remember the cruise, the ship that goes out of the Navy Pier. One of the ships there.
Not Wendella, the other one. I think you're talking.
Yeah, I forget what the name of that one was, but at the end, I'm walking off the ship, and when I would do networking events, everybody stayed for hours. It was hard to get them out of the room because we glued them together through the interactive exercises that I created. He came running off after me, and he goes, Melissa, I'm cured. So through the years, I saw that it was like what Tony Robbins experiences, because what I found, the bigger the audience, the more connective. And one of the places that I love to be with the most would be techies. I've spoke at MIT Forum at least 3 times. I love the Motorola people.
Why is that? Because they're engineers and
Yeah, they loved having a 7-step process for building networks. and they get that. Process, and by the whole group doing it, like if I had it at Motorola, we had 350 people in the audience. And I said to them, get together in groups of 10 and then find out how many degrees away you are from Carolyn Kennedy. Well, it was incredible. We had mics in the audience and they'd come up and share. They were the coolest people there, the engineers. And finally, they came up with stories like my cousin was playing, was in ballet with Carolyn. And then another one, John F. Kennedy Jr. was alive then. Someone knew someone who played football with him. So I finally said, how many people are within 6 degrees from Carolyn Kennedy? And 2/3 of the room stood up.
Wow.
So then I could move them into an exercise that really made a difference. And this is an iconic story. It was, Motorola's broken up and now has ripped off into other areas. But they knew at that time they were siloed. And the best way to break a silo or silos is to create networks or net worlds, as I'd say. And so then the next exercise was everybody had cards, note cards. I said, again, get together in groups of 10, somebody you didn't, a group before that you weren't in. And they always did what I asked because that's the magic of the big crowd. Harder with small crowds. And I said, now pick one person in the organization you haven't met yet, you want to meet, and write that at the top of your card because they had 80,000 people in their company.
Right.
Write one person on the other side you want to meet that's outside of the company, anyone in the world. I mean, they traveled the world. So they did that. And then they opened up, like a lot of the interactive networking events they did, they opened up the back and they had a big buffet. And they asked me to get books. So I know we're leading back into books. So I actually had gone to their own store, got 350 books because that was part of the talk. They wanted me to do that. And I signed books for 2.5 hours. Oh. And what happened was all during the time, I wish I would have videoed it because there's another woman who videoed Ben Zander from the Boston Philharmonic, and she created a program out of it. She charged $50,000 for the program. Wow. It was one of the videos that she'd give to companies training. I wish I would have put that as a requirement because all I heard for 2.5 hours were people sharing across silos. You mean if we got together, we could order paper supplies and get a discount? And oh, well, we could go over here and get this and that. And all, they were probably saving millions and millions and millions by networking internally.
Right.
And then at that time, I believe his name was Ed Zander. He was the president. And he walked up to me and he goes, how come I haven't heard of you before? And I said, I don't know. And he said, I heard that you got a special deal on our books. You got 10% off. Thanks for saving us money. How did you do that? I said, I walked down the hall over to your bookstore and I had hit a tipping point. So they gave me 10% off. This is the sad, blinding flash of the obvious in the big companies. And I learned that over 50% of their consulting is based on duplication of effort. So they'll bring in a McKinsey or a Boston Consulting Group or whatever, and they're all doing the same thing because no one's sharing. And that's
I noticed that.
Yeah.
I noticed that. Well, and I've dealt with big companies, deal with some now, and it is interesting how there's like it's almost like they don't trust each other. So they're all, like you said, I'm blown away by, well, we're doing that too, is what I hear a lot. It's like, right. Someone else is doing something. There's this initiative. Oh, well, we're doing that over here. But it's almost like, and that's why I think a lot of them are in trouble because they don't inter-network, which, working on my book is one of the things. It's like, pick the people that are close to you so you guys can begin to form a real good culture,
And practice a process.
Yeah.
What's beautiful is I learned a lot. Billy Dexter. I talked about him before, and I've introduced him to you. And we are going to do Best Networkers in the World contest all over the country.
Yes, we are.
We're going to find all those who are like us and show people what we can do. It might take, 100 of us to become one Oprah, but we're going to do it. And it was a moment when I introduced Billy to you, because when I was gifted by Regis, the shared office space, a room that had 8 seats in it, was like a business connection center for a year. That was worth $80,000. And they had a wonderful space for me to do conferences. So I created this contest. People flew in from all over the world, and Billy was there. And Billy was connected to me through Jocelyn again. So it's the small world concept. We really are now into 3 degrees, because I'm a social scientist. We're into 3 degrees. Facebook has validated it. So basically, we're only 2 people away versus 5 people away from anyone we want to meet. So your process and what you're doing, the community you've developed, the evergreen community, which is so vibrant, is so important. And one of my best moments in life was introducing Billy to you, and just watching Billy, who won one of the Best Networkers in the World contest, delivered to me over $1 million worth of business so far through referrals over the last 10 years, helping people write books. And then knowing that Billy said, because of his network, or Networld as I'd call it, he's received over $34 million worth of business.
Wow.
Now, not only has he done that, but he's done it and had fun at the same time. And he gives back, and he helps Ivy League kids who are destined for Ivy League skills. They're valedictorians in inner cities, go to college, go to Ivy League schools.
And what's the name of the book that the 2 of you worked on?
We wrote Making Your Network, the art and science of career and business networking, which what I found then after teaching networking and developing it for like 2 decades, that when you blend the art against the science, you really start getting people interested. Now, they love the science, but I can validate the science. Now, you threw in your book, because I'm segueing over to that, which I had so much fun writing first, The Street Guide to Digital Business Influence, right?
First.
And first, not next.
Because everyone wants to be first. They want to be first known, first, called, first.
It is. And it's and how to do it with grace and love and connection and authenticity. So that's a very powerful spot that I think where we're at right now, what I've been searching for years, and I've met up with those people, and I think you're one of those, I know you're one of those, somebody who you can start right from the get-go, not wondering whether you should trust, but trusting and then really accelerating goal achievement. Right. And that's where it's such an honor. I was the networking coach on 6-figure jobs for 10 years, and I couldn't stop because I was fascinated that people would pay $3,500 on average to outplacement firms. And I'm sorry, but I worked with the outplacement firms. I worked with Drake Beam for years, always giving and never receiving anything from any of them, because people have such a hard time when they're in between jobs. Right. But I would sit on the phone and do an hour consultation, and every single time people would say, my firm spent $3,500 on teaching me LinkedIn, or not teaching me LinkedIn, helping me network. All I got was a cubicle and a bunch of numbers. And I said, well, let me show you LinkedIn. And I was there when LinkedIn started, got to present to them, which was like going to Oz, I told them, when they had only 80 people. And I would say, here's LinkedIn. And I always had interns. So I had always had my interns studying how LinkedIn was growing. And for a decade, all I heard from people were things like, oh, I don't want to be on that. That's just for people changing jobs. That's for this, right, or that's for that.
People still say that.
I know they do. So I'm saying that's a bunch of BS. Ever since the beginning, LinkedIn is nirvana. And I'm the biggest fan. I was one of the 10 lions in the beginning, the LinkedIn Open Networkers. But, staying steady on that, what I found with people calling on the phone, they'd say, I can't believe I spent this money, or my company spent this money. I got nothing out of it, but this 1 hour changed everything for me. And so now, flash forward, LinkedIn started in 2002 when I had my best.
And just a bottom line, in that hour, you were actually teaching them to be human and to connect. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Basically, instead of just like, do a bunch of outbound dials. And there was this whole, I think you changed the whole dynamic of what networking was supposed to be, not what people were doing. I just want to make sure I hear that.
No, and I appreciate that. Networlding stands for building mutually beneficial relationships to create transformational opportunities. And what I did through the years is, as a practitioner, and I'd like to think, you're one of the 10, I'm one of the 10 leading practitioners. We're out there regularly. I can't get away from networking, and selling books is all about building relationships and building networks. So it's asking those dynamic questions. And I would say Sally Helgeson, who wrote The Female Advantage in Thriving 24/7, I got to be on a panel at Fortune Brands, and she led the panel, and I shared my 7 levels of support. I call it the Great Exchange, the Networlding Support Exchange model. Now, I've blended it with Billy's, so it's the Making Your Network Networlding Support Exchange, and there's an assessment in the book we've used for years to identify the best networkers. So that's what we're going to do when we find the best networkers in the world, because my hypothesis is, as we come together, and then I'll mention the virtuous circle we're talking about, you are passionate. Like the thing that lights me up is not making more money unless it's to help children, young and new adults, get better starts in life. And I've been mentoring for years, and you're working on digital literacy in schools. And many, many of my clients now, over 120 books that I've helped authors write and publish, many of my authors have that give back. I should say they all have to now. I don't take on authors who aren't focused on making a difference. But many of my authors are people of color, and we've gone into inner cities, and we did go into Austin, into a wonderful charter school there where James Rousseau, who ran a division of Allstate, he ended up in that school, teaching them his model from his book called Success on Your Own Terms. And he mentored 4 kids, and then they had to each pay it 2 word instead of forward to 2 other kids, because that's it's cool. the peers that have the influence with one another. And that leads me back to your book, which is so cool, because you go back into your street life. And I had a street life inside my home. My home was absolutely crazy, and my mother was crazy, and it was a crazy childhood. But I learned what I didn't want and created what I did want, and now can't do enough giving back, and with a huge focus now on building community centers. And that's
huge. That's huge.
Yeah. That's my big passion is helping build community centers, and starting in Chicago. And because of you, you introduced me to Colin Egglesfield, who we're bringing a book out called Agile Artist. And the subtitle is Life Lessons from Hollywood and Beyond. And we're going to take a significant portion of those proceeds and put them into building out these community centers, especially in at-risk communities.
Awesome. Yeah. And our mission is to put, and we have our whole digital citizenship program, and ours is to put it into schools that can't afford that program so that all kids have a chance not, to grow up alone, which I think is a big thing, because you mentioned that. And I don't think it's just, introverts. And I think Robin or somebody chimed in and said, I have to work to be an extrovert, so, I think we all can relate to that. Even now I'll walk in and who these networking events are, that they're friends of ours that have these events that have 300 people. That's overwhelming to me. I like, 50 and under, so I can meet everyone and know the relationships in the room. So I think we go through chapters of our life where it's good to have the mega events, and then you appreciate having the smaller, more intimate networks. But one thing I want to go back to for a minute is, and I think, I write about this in my book, you mention it, is that you grew up lonely. And I'm wondering if, and I grew up feeling alone on the streets. And so as a lot of us have had those periods, whether it's a lot of our life or part of our life, where we have this factor where we just feel alone, and especially entrepreneurs and people that are going for it, or leaders at the top. For you, was that part of the core hunger that drove you to understand and feel how people, or to study how people should connect?
Yeah, I see what I saw by creating these exercises of connection was that you could take a person, like one in Northwestern alumni, MBA alumni, lots of MBA groups. She had Coke bottle glasses, and she said to me before we started the event, "I'm so afraid and I don't know anyone." And I said, when we network, see, the way networking events should be, because I did them, is to have your tables be teams. So that fits into your social teaming.
Yep, it
and
does.
Then the first exercise, well, the big problem we have, I'm going to segue off just for a second, is that our small talk is the enemy of the people. And yes, we are doing an inch deep and a mile wide talk instead of a mile deep and an inch wide. And so I had so many experiences where people didn't get that, even executive groups. So I'll go back to Northwestern, but I'll first share the Loyola MBA story. So I'm at the Loyola MBA group, that they're asking me, well, what are your networking extravaganzas like? I said, well, let me play the game with you. Let's start with, and my best exercise, and I'm giving it to you, it's always worked, is to break people up into groups. It could be groups of 5, groups of 8, groups of 10, and have them find out what they have in common that isn't self-evident, like we all have eyes or we all have noses. And they went, huh? And I said, well, let's play the game. They said, truly, we can't play that game. And I asked them why. Wow. They had an Hispanic banker on the board, and an Asian person, and an African American person, and there were about 10 of them. And they said, honestly, we don't have anything in common. And I smiled. And I said, I said, well, humor me just for 1 minute. Am I mistaken, or aren't you on the board because you came from the same school? You went and got your MBAs here?
Duh.
They all turned red and off they went. And once they go off, they just went and they found all these things in common. And juxtapose that against a law firm. Another exercise I do with people who know each other is I give them the challenge of figuring out what they have in common that they didn't know they had in common. And we found out in one law firm that the 2 partners played the cello since the age of something like 5, and they never knew it.
Wow.
And I kept finding that and finding that and finding connections and finding connections and finding connections. So go back to Northwestern, we did that exercise. And at the end, this woman walked up with the Coke bottle glasses and said, "Thank you. You've changed my life." So what I said, I actually dedicated Networlding. That was my 7th book. So I'm thinking, who else can I dedicate the book to? So I decided I dedicated to God for giving us each other, without which none of this is possible.
Right.
And we just don't have events that really bring people together, and I'm able to connect the whole room. You can also do it with a ball of yarn. I did that with the 22 chambers.
I remember.
Yeah. So you just have fun with all these things, and everybody walks out feeling more than versus less than.
Yeah, and I had this. I have this social experience that I love. You know me. I always pre-study the room whenever we have workshops or whoever it is. I look at the room and I pre-map people, and ahead of time, and I see people in different spots depending on who they are, and I'm so fascinated by that exercise. And so what's interesting in events, I would study things like, and then I would go, well, who likes red wine? And I stand up, look around at who the red wine drinkers are, and then the white wine drinkers, and some would stand up for both. And then, who loves to run, whether it's a marathon or you just love running, who are you? And so I would pick about 6 or 7 things. And then it was interesting because we would tape it and we would watch people after the event broke up and they were networking, they would cluster on their own.
Right.
Sort of like the yarn exercise. And so, it was like interesting. And then we do the same thing with like, well, who knows, we would pick like 3 hubs in the room and stand up if Melissa, and people would stand up. And now if someone's standing up that then the rest then stand up, and so it would take
it's
literally
like the first follower, that video of the first follower. Right. And so if you go with that, imagine having those types of events, in my mind, in a community center. And having, the way I see it, having people who have masters in library science helping, who are also happen to be wonderful networkers. I bet there are at least 10 out there in the world. And actually there are probably more, but they could create the connections. Now that we have LinkedIn, you could be connecting to people wherever you travel. And what I say is missing is the facilitated networking and somebody who would create those wonderful connections. So in Networlding, I go back to the tipping point, the science, when Gladwell said you can be a maven salesperson or a connector.
Right.
What I discovered as a practitioner is that you can be all 3. So what I say to people, and especially because you're working with thought leaders, I'll say, please just let's focus on one connection where you've discerned, where you are a maven, where you just one great connection. And because our brains are neural networks in themselves, our brains will sort for the best. And if you ask them for 2 or 3, I think the neural network in your brain gets all jammed up.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah. Well, and remember, I wrote a ton or referenced a ton because I studied mistaken beliefs and family systems for so long. It is amazing when I was teaching the graduate program, how many people would go, well, our culture doesn't allow us to think that way. And I go, wait a minute, you're you.
Right.
Why don't you be the one to break that? And they're like, oh, yeah. And then they would go back, to a family situation and things like that. And I'm like, because we would teach them that you don't have to wait for your MBA to like use your MBA. So what a concept, It was like, really? Because they're like, well, I have to wait for my MBA and then I'll get this job or then I'll get promoted. I said, no, why are you waiting? Network all the way to that promotion now. So in 8 weeks, we would get people promoted. It was like exciting. It's exciting to see that process. So, and then when all of a sudden they're like, our family doesn't think that way. Well, they're carrying those mistaken.
They're carrying those systems and those mindsets in their brain. And
we all have them. We all have them.
We all do. And breaking them is by, I think, rewiring in these interactive events. And then, like I said, mark my words, Usually I'm 10 years ahead of it, but sooner or later, somebody's going to go, wait a minute, another nail salon, another hair salon, another clothing store. No, let's put in a networking center. When it's more than 80% of the way people get jobs, why wouldn't there be networking centers out there? I think it is the biggest gap and the craziest chasm that we haven't crossed. And I even had the honor of meeting up with this young guy who's a professor at the University of Chicago now. My husband made friends with him. He lives in our building. And he works with Ron Burt, who I knew way back when.
Oh, yeah.
But these are theorists. It's like, get your butt out on the street. Let's open these centers up. No more loneliness. It doesn't have to happen. Let's get jobs faster. And all I'm saying is if somebody who has a brain in their head hears these ideas and connects, I've got the whole plan I've worked on for 10 years. It is crazy that we've been waiting for something that's been sitting right in front of us for so long, and that it took LinkedIn at least a decade before they had a special offering for salespeople. Now, these are people who went to Ivy League schools. I'm sorry, but there's a big problem here. I mean, what are they thinking when it's right at our doorstep?
Well, and what's interesting is I teach a social career program, obviously in the universities and the schools and the high schools and everything, and as well for adults, but then also the social selling program. And I'm going to give everyone a secret right now that I usually don't talk about in public, but 80% of the process on LinkedIn is the same. 80% is the same between if you're looking for a job, you want to get promoted, or you want to generate sales.
Thank you. I was looking for that statistic, and I was going to ask the folks at the University of Chicago, do you think you can get me a team of kids who can validate this?
No, I validated it over and over and over. Over 120,000 people now have taken our programs, and we've match pointed the success and the pathway.
Well, do you realize we've been working for hundreds of hours on your book, and you just told me the thing I've been looking for a decade.
See that? So I think we're more of an 8.5 than a 9 or a 10. So I'm going to bump us down, and we got a little ways to go on our.
Yeah, well, I love that. I love that. I've been looking for that statistic.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So here's another statistic, because this is what allows our program to be scalable. Is, we're in GE, and we started out in GE Capital, till they sold it off. But, I deal a lot in finance, wealth management, banking. I come from Merrill Lynch, the accounting world.
Yeah.
So I've always done well, and I've been very patient for all of you listening that are in those fields, because it's taken you 10 years to realize it's okay to do that. It's compliant to do what we teach you to do. So I've been patient. But the idea here is that whenever we switch industries, because people go, oh, you know what? My industry, that is not my industry, or that doesn't apply to my industry. And I'm like, do you realize when I was consulting you, I was teaching you distribution principles, even though you're a manufacturing company or you're a service company? I was teaching you retail principles. Do you understand this? So 80% of our program, only 10 to 20% changes. Now we are now in the aviation sales business. I don't know much. I've flown on planes. That's it. Mm-hmm. Now we're teaching digital aviation, and we're teaching healthcare and power, and literally social selling is the same.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me make sure I validated this. And I see, I love all this, this talk, the chat on the side. I'm looking at it. Thanks for the Odyssey. That was the ship or the boat or the whatever.
The Odyssey, right? Yeah, Odyssey.
Yeah, the Odyssey. But it's one of these epiphany moments, these aha moments that. So you're saying what I believe, and validated that the way people get jobs, keep jobs, are promoted
and be promoted more.
Yeah, and they make more, and that's the way the top salespeople work, right? Through networking. But you validated all of those touch points. Yes.
And industry to industry. I've had people change countries, continents, industries, and all that is validated. And social teaming is at the core.
So what I'm thinking for your book, so this is how I work. I now
Guys,
have.
we're working now in front of you. So,
we're actually working on his book. You have to put in an appendix. And you're going to create a new kind of appendix, the AHA appendix. So now you got your people. They're going to have to, Kate and Jackson, right?
Yep.
They're going to have to work and get all this documented.
I have it documented.
Good. Well, I don't mean that. I mean, all these points that you're making here today should be in the appendix. And people can go look at them. It's like the secrets, the top secrets that have been validated.
Well, and honestly, we get this data from our participants out here. They're the people that, I've got Robin in here reporting, oh my gosh, this is what I did and it worked. Oh yeah. And then, it's like, this is so much.
I really I think you were saying that there was a silo problem in Honeywell, Phillips and MorphoTrust. And IBM, that should be a poll though. You should do a poll out to the group and find out, the most siloed companies and shame on them. They all have to wake up and do something for themselves first by helping their people.
Yep.
But it's what you see are connections, but I think the big problem is, this is one of my metaphors, that most people live in a checker playing world than a chess world.
Right.
They can't see more than one move out. And so they don't take the time. And so when people say they're strategists, I want to say, show me the money. Show me that you can be a strategist, because I can't believe that these companies are working the way they're working. And one other thing for anyone, this is another challenge which you can do right now. Show me all the companies, or not, which is the truth, that have formal business networking programs,
right,
like what we're talking about in their companies. That was my big aha. After helping 120 authors, business authors, write books, every one of them had a chapter on networking. And I kept looking and doing more research. And I realized, after all the years I spent teaching it, that there are over 200,000 hits on Google. When you type in quotes, formal mentoring programs, 200,000 companies that have mentoring programs. And we are void of companies that have significant networking programs. And of course, they're not happening in the schools the way they should. They're certainly not happening in the high schools. So we have a huge opportunity and a chasm that we hopefully, because now you and I are connected. I connected you with Billy because I love to do that. And I'm going to find all the other best networkers in the world that get this, and we're going to make a difference and close the gap.
Amen, sister. I'm with you. How about everybody? Is everybody with us on this? I hope so. So look at that. And we filled up the whole show time, and I didn't even get to like 9 of the questions. It's just how we work all the time. So we always have to have you back. Everybody's going, amen, definitely. So we're getting a lot of good shout outs. Everybody, we got the train going here. So this is awesome. So as we close out, you've mentioned a bunch of books. You've mentioned a bunch of authors. The website is networlding.com. So people can.
Yes, or Melissa G. Wilson. You can .com. You can get there, Melissa G. And I like to call myself now the $1 Million Muse, because that's how I work with the authors. And there are always many surprises to work with me, many good surprises, right?
Yes, great surprises. Whether it's 2 a.m. or 6 a.m, doesn't matter. We're always surprising each other. And we're hard.
And hi, Julie Clark. She's and I know Joe. What is his name? Oh, Jimmy Comiskey. Is that it?
Oh, yeah, Jimmy Z.
Jimmy. We've known each other forever. What a nice guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's one of the crew here. And guess who we're going to have on the next episode is our now mutual friend, Wayne Messmer. So you brought me Wayne as well. And those in Chicago know that he sang the national anthem for the Blackhawks. I heard him for 7 years of my season ticket holding for the Wolves, the Cubs, the Bears, and the White Sox. And he's the official voice of the Chicago Cubs. And we'll see. He might sing for us. So Julie's like, can he sing for us? But I met him because Melissa's on my team, right? So you guys know about social teaming. She's on my team. And she brought him to one of my events. We did the interview and we just hit it off and have become good friends out of the whole thing. So I want to thank you for that too.
Sure. And if you want to read his book in advance, that's called The Voice of Victory.
Yes, it's a great book, The Voice of Victory.
It's gripping. He's one of the best storytellers in the world.
Yeah, and many people don't know his story, so we'll save that for his interview. So real quick here, as we close out, we have 2 winners. Let's bring Kate and Jackson on. I'd like to hear from everybody in the audience. What did you get from this session that you can take away and put into your life and put into action for you? So Kate, what did you get out of the session today?
I really just like Melissa's outlook on networking and how it's kind of, a lot of people just think like, oh, I'm not good at networking, but it's something that you can learn and get better at. So I know sometimes when we go to events and there are like hundreds of people, I feel way less comfortable than like intimate ones. But I think if I kind of started looking at it more like that, I would be better at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, one other little thing, you can always go with the wingman or wing girl. The MIT people, that made all the difference with them. So someday I might go with you if I get brave enough.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Wingman or wing woman. That sounds like a blog. That's awesome. Jackson, how about you?
Yeah, I would say my biggest thing was something you said early on was that you really you struggle with loneliness when because you crave the connections, you crave networking, being around people, that engagement. And, I always say that, I'm like, oh, I don't need it, but I enjoy it. But then, when I'm alone, I'm like, I should probably just call someone, check in, see how they're doing. Because I also, it's human nature to crave that. You know what I mean?
I totally agree. Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. That was really beautiful. Yeah, you can always call me, Jackson.
Okay, I will. I'll add you to my list.
Thank you.
Put her on your team. I highly recommend. Put her on your team. It's scouting and drafting. So with that being said, Jackson, we have 2 winners, one out of Facebook and one out of Zoom. That get us Starbucks gift cards.
Yeah. So our winner for the Zoom in our Zoom platform is Howard Delaney. So congratulations. Ooh. Remember, you have to use that for a meeting where you talk about something you learned on this podcast, teach it to someone else. Also, our Facebook winner is James Gustin.
Shut up, James Gustin.
James Gustin, I know. We love James. He was actually, one of the first ones in on Facebook, and he hung with us for the whole time. So I want to thank you, James, and remember to call me because we have to go to Starbucks. So.
All right. So awesome stuff. And then everybody was just typing in a lot of the things that they're going to use. Some people do talks. Some people, have small meetings, and they're going to use some of your ideas for that, Melissa. And so social teaming and everything else. So it was a very good gelling show. And then for those of you that are on camera, you can see Kate's pooch. You want to introduce your dog real quick, Kate?
Yeah, this is Maddox. I'm sorry. He wouldn't stop whining. He needed to know what was going on.
He wanted to be on the podcast.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah. He was enthralled by Melissa's networking tips, so he had to come say hello.
We'll do a segment and call it Pausecast because then we can put the pause up there. So
I love that.
Although I think that's one of the other podcasts out there, but we'll figure it out. Well, Melissa, it's a delight. Thank you so much for all your wisdom, all your guidance and leadership, and helping me crank through this book. I have a lot of anxiety knowing that there's another thing to do, but that's okay. It's part of the thing, man. It's like, and Melissa makes it great. So those of you looking to do a book, just please get a hold of Melissa. We'll send you the websites and the links, but when you're ready, she has a lot of cool downloads that you can just get right from the website. And then when you're ready, just give her a call. She'll take you through the journey. So
thank you. Yeah, I have 3 free books you could download, and I love giving things away. So please go get them.
All right. All right, everybody. Well, listen, thank you so much. We have Wayne on next week. And remember, whatever you learned today, please share it with somebody that you care about. And then you're a mentor, you're a thought leader, and you're a business influencer. So with that being said, we'll see you all online. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Influence Factory podcast. We welcome feedback and suggestions. You can provide these by visiting our website at www.myinfluencefactory.com. And if you are interested in Social Jack's 90 Days to Influence program, you can simply go to 90daystobusinessinfluence.com and simply ask for the next steps. While our program airs regularly on Zoom webcasts and Facebook Live on Wednesdays at noon Central, we invite you to download episodes on your favorite channel: YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and who knows where else in the future. We will also provide occasional on-location live streams with special guests that we will announce in our community Facebook group, Business Influencer Alliance, as well as on all Social Jack channels. Our mission is to help you build your digital business influence with this podcast, as well as inspire, educate, and entertain those who are hungry to collaborate in a cool place with cool business professionals just like you.